America's healthcare advocate, Carrie Hall.
Hello, America. Welcome to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HI Radio Network. You can find out more about us by going to the website, americashealthcareadvocate.com. Send me an email. I'm happy to answer them. I get quite a few, so I don't answer each and every one the same day, but I do answer each and every one. In studio with me today, Ron Hoyler, back with us today. He is working at St. Luke's. He is in charge of the St. Luke's Diabetes Education and Management Program. We're going to be talking about the topic of Diabetes Day, and I'm going to tell a little personal story about why I asked him to come in studio today and talk about this topic. So welcome back, Ron.
Thanks, Carrie, for having me.
Glad to have you here. Our producer, Mr. Darren Wilhite, behind the microphones, Dave Thiessen behind the cameras. All these shows are recorded and posted on YouTube. We are at 425,050 views. It's really quite amazing. I never would have imagined we could get that many views on YouTube, but we have. So we have our own channel on YouTube, America's Healthcare Advocate. You can certainly find it if you Google it. No problem there. Also, 15 podcast platforms. We're on Spotify. We're on Odyssey. We're on iHeartRadio's platform. We're on SoundCloud. You name it, we're probably on it in terms of podcast platforms. So when you hear one of these shows, maybe it's something you want to share with somebody or tell somebody about. Maybe you've got a family member struggling with weight and diabetes, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetic like I was. That's the purpose of this show today. I'm doing this today using myself as an example, and I asked Ron to come in here to talk about this topic and the fact that we have an epidemic in this country. If you think not, we have 136 million Americans, either diabetics or pre-diabetics. We only have 385 million people in this country, so what does that tell you? It tells you we got a lot of people with problem, okay? So, as I said, Ron is an expert in this topic. That's why we brought him in studio today. He is at St. Luke's Healthcare System here in Kansas City. He holds a Master's of Business Administration in Healthcare Administration, a Master of Science in Nursing, a Bachelor of Arts in Personal Administration, and Associate Applied Science Nursing. He is a wonderful individual. He has to be one of the men in my Bible study group, and I know him very well and been very fortunate to get to know him. And I wanted to bring him in studio today just to talk about this issue and to help people understand how to deal with it. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, okay? So I've been struggling with weight for the last probably 3 years that I have not been able to get below 250 pounds. I don't care what I did. I might get down to 245 if I'm lucky, but I couldn't get below that number, maybe 244. That was probably the best it ever was. And I went in for a physical, had the blood work done, Ron, and I came back pre-diabetic. And it scared the hell out of me, okay, because I did not want to become a type 2 diabetic, okay? So I went to my primary care physician and asked for some help, and she sent me to a place called a healthcare clinic here in town, and I got involved in that clinic, and it was called Heartland Weight Loss. They've done a wonderful job, and I sit here and talk to you today. I weigh 230 pounds. Now, here's the point I want to make. I'm not taking Ozempic, and I'm not taking Wegovy. I made some lifestyle changes, okay, some pretty significant ones. I'm still quite happy with my lifestyle, but I made some lifestyle changes. We'll talk about those as we get into the broadcast. But you can solve this problem. You don't have to become a type 2 diabetic. You don't have to become a type 1 diabetic if you are a type 2 diabetic. And that's why we're doing this show today. I'm passionate about this because I went through it, okay? And I had a hell of a time trying to solve the problem. I was very fortunate. I used this man as a coach. He helped me, okay, and helped me go through this process. But I went to the folks at Heartland. I've had the doctor from Heartland on here along with one of the clinicians, and they've done a great job for me. And what the message I want to get across to you is you can fix this if you want to. You have to start with the desire to want to do it. So let's just talk about this. 135 million Americans.
Crazy, isn't it?
Ron, that should scare the hell out of people in this country. There's a constant chatter about the cost of health insurance, the cost of health insurance, the cost of health insurance. Well, for 26 years, okay, I was a health insurance broker, all right? And I will tell you, there's an old adage in this business. 20% of the people drive 80% of the claims. Guess who the largest number of people in that 20% category are?
People with diabetes.
They're people with diabetes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did we get here? And then we'll get into let's talk about the problem. How do we get here what the problem is, and then we'll talk about the solutions, Ron. So how did this country evolve to a point now where we're seeing, this number, 136 million, either pre-diabetic like I was. By the way, I am not now, and I'm not even classified as obese because I've dropped the weight level so significantly. But how did we get here?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors that have contributed to this. Technology is one of them. When we look at how technology has made our life easier, that means we're spending less physical energy doing things, right? Less time walking because we can drive. We're spending more time eating because there's fast food restaurants on every corner. Not only that, every fast food restaurant wants to supersize your meal. And of course, you want to get that extra large
Those French fries from Five Guys, I'm telling you, there's more French fries in that bowl than you could possibly eat, and that's a regular size order.
So we end up taking in far more calories, carbs, sugar, sodium than we ever are going to use or need for that matter. And as it accumulates in our body, it affects our body. Right now, almost 90% of Americans are overweight. And when we are overweight, certain metabolic processes become somewhat dysfunctional. The insulin our body creates and how effectively the body can use it is one of those systems that's affected.
So talk about that, and what does that mean to diabetes? The glucose levels, those issues, and how does that relate to diabetes? How does that occur using processed foods, artificial sweeteners, all the things that we consume in our body that translates into that problem, which then makes you either pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic?
Sure. Well, first, let's understand what type 2 diabetes is. It's also similar to insulin resistance. When we eat certain foods, those foods serve a purpose. For instance, eggs, meat, and cheese, those are classified as protein. Our body needs protein to maintain muscle and to repair tissue. So when we eat proteins, we are helping to maintain our important muscle. That's why you see athletes and bodybuilders doing the extra protein shakes. Now, when we eat other foods like rice or pasta or potatoes or corn or bread, those are classified as carbohydrates, and our body needs carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is not a dirty word, but our body converts it into the fuel our brain and muscles need, and that fuel is called blood sugar. And when we have blood sugar circulating in our system and our brain or muscles need it, our body produces a hormone called insulin. Think of insulin like the key that unlocks the door. It opens up the pathway for the blood sugar to get out of the bloodstream into the muscles and into the brain. When we have type 2 diabetes, the insulin we're making, it's dysfunctional. It's not getting the address of which door to go unlock. And so our blood sugar levels rise up. Our blood becomes thicker and stickier. That's harder on the heart to pump. It's harder on the kidneys to filter. It's harder to circulate thick blood through the tiny blood vessels in your eyes and in your gums. It's hard to circulate it all the way down to your feet. So then after years of higher blood sugar, we begin to see complications. The problem is that this is somewhat silent. This is not an acute situation that we see happen.
No, it creeps up on you. It creeped up on me. I fought this for 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then what we do, like in America, we do with several diseases and disorders, is we look to a medicine to take. And the uniqueness of diabetes is that it's not just a medicine, it's a trifecta that needs to be used for a solution. So we're talking diet, exercise, and medicine.
When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about that because that's what I did. I am not on Ozempic and I'm not on Wegovy. If you thought that when I told you that I lost 20 pounds and gone from 250 down to 230, that's not how I did it, okay? We're going to talk about those medications and we're going to talk about the side effects and some of the issues associated with them. And then we're going to talk about how to do it without doing that. Okay, so stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HIA Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA.
The Golden Rule. Treat others as you want to be treated. I'm Steve Keeker, and this is one of the founding principles of my firm, Senior Care Consulting. Since 2002, our value statement has included honor our mother and father, respect our elders, care for those in need, and treat your family as our own. We've been honored to help hundreds of families make one of the most difficult decisions they could ever make, serving them in their greatest time of need. If you're looking for someone who can provide you experienced and objective guidance when searching for a senior care community, reach out today and discover the services of Senior Care Consulting at 913-945-2800, 913-945-2800. Know your options and choose with care at seniorcareconsulting.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA. Remember, this is a very important show for a lot of people out there, 135 million people with this issue to deal with. If you've got a family member, this is broadcasting around the country. It's going to be up on the podcast channels. It's going to be on the YouTube channel as well. Have them go to the website and watch the show, America's Healthcare Advocate, or have them listen to the podcast. Maybe that's your husband. Maybe it's your wife. Maybe it's your grandfather. Maybe it's your father. Maybe it's your mother. And they're just not dealing. They're significantly overweight. They're either already a type 2 diabetic or they're at risk for it. Have them listen to this and see if this is something that motivates them to make the changes in their life that can turn this around. Believe me, it's worth it. I know because I did it. And that's why I'm doing this show. And that's why I asked Ron to come in here and take time out of his day to talk to you about this issue. So this is interesting. We talked about this off air. I want to talk about it now. Type 1 versus type 2. I thought, and I was wrong, that if you had type 2 diabetes, it could morph into type 1. Type 1 diabetes, you said, is basically a genetic issue that can develop over time. So talk about that and then the difference between the two.
Yeah, so basically type 1 is an autoimmune disorder in which your body's immune system mistakenly thinks that the cells that make insulin are a threat, and it goes and it systematically destroys them so that your body can no longer produce the hormone insulin. Type 2, while it has a genetic function, it is more a process of time where our body becomes dysfunctional with the way it is using and producing the insulin so that it can't get the job done.
So basically, here's the deal, all right? Overweight and obesity, lack of physical activity. If you're a couch potato, 31.9% of physical inactivity defined as getting less than 10 minutes a week of moderate, vigorous exercise. Yeah, well, that's a problem, okay? If you're sitting on the couch eating that bag of potato chips and drinking a Budweiser every night, you're probably not going to do much for yourself in terms of health issues and resolving. If you are a type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic, you're going to stay there or you're going to get worse. Okay, high blood pressure, this surprised me. This is another thing. When I went in this last time to Heartland and they took my blood pressure, and I'll talk about the chart that they do every time I go in there, but I went in there, my blood pressure was the lowest it has ever been in my life, okay? I was absolutely floored by what my blood pressure was because it was just that low. I had never seen blood pressure that low before. It was like 129/70, and I was like, I've never been in that category. I'm on blood pressure meds. I might be able to start getting off of them now because I've lost so much weight and because I've changed my diet around as a result of that. But that's one of the issues is high blood pressure. High cholesterol, that's a huge problem. And then smoking, clearly, if you're smoking, you're making yourself more at risk for these issues by combining all of that together. So now we have this trifecta. We have processed food. We have all these sugars. We have obesity, okay, inactivity, and that all comes together and it creates this problem. Let's talk a little bit about how that affects people's lives. And then in the next segment, we get into the long segment, we'll talk about how you overcome that and how you can change, how you have the ability, okay, to change that. But let's just talk about some of those things that happen. I mentioned some of it. It affects your vision. I've got friends of mine, people that I've known that have lost limbs, literally, I mean amputations, toes, feet, those kind of things. So talk a little bit about that, Ron.
Well, diabetes is ravaging what it does to your bodies and the systems in your body over time. And the unfortunate thing is that doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to happen if we can get people educated. I say that diabetes is a disease of inconvenience. And really that's not giving it full justice. It is terrible to have to think about diabetes every time you want to eat something each day, every time you want to do some kind of activity, when you go to bed. It is a disease that is constantly on your mind, and so you don't ever get away from it. Some people choose to ignore it. Some people hope that just taking medicine will do the trick. And when I had said trifecta earlier, I meant there's medicine, and that's great to help. But really, predominantly, what you do for yourself is you get to an ideal body weight by watching what you eat, and you do some exercise or activity.
So now we're going to talk about the silver bullet. I can't tell you the number of people I know that are doing Ozempic or Wegovy. I didn't do it. In fact, I was offered it by my doctor, and I said no. Okay, because it scares the hell out of me. The side effects from it, all kinds of things are happening now. Darren told a story in the break there. Gwyneth Paltrow had a guest in her home who one of the side effects is this massive diarrhea, and they had a horrible attack in her home, I guess while they were having some kind of a dinner. I've got a friend who we were supposed to go out to lunch with on Saturday. They had to pass. He just started Ozempic, and when we were talking, he said, I really apologize. But I said, well, what you're dealing with is probably a side effect. So talk about that, okay?
Well, most all medicines are at risk for some side effect.
Correct.
And what we're doing is we're weighing, is it worth it? But in certain terms, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? One of the side effects of Ozempic is often some people have the diarrhea, the bloating, the constipation. But I should mention that there are some people that don't, and it works very effectively for them. But that is a potential side effect that can be embarrassing, and it can be very, very uncomfortable to deal with. And so we always are going to say, make sure that you've talked with your doctor about any medication and what the side effects are, and if it would be right for you.
So what about Wegovy?
So Wegovy is essentially like Ozempic, like a stronger version, and it is FDA approved for weight loss specifically. Now, Ozempic was FDA approved for people with diabetes. It just turned out that one of the effects of it was that it slowed down your digestion so that you felt full longer. And if you felt full longer, you would eat less. And so the natural consequence of that was that you would lose weight.
And so, a lot of people look at this like it's a silver bullet. I've got, friends, associates, business folks that I work with who've lost 10, 20, 30 pounds on this stuff. But there's a problem there, okay? One of the things that I get every time I go to Heartland is they do a complete chart on me. They do weight, they do body fat, and they do muscle mass. And so what we're trying to do when they do that is we're trying to line those three up. If you can get this to be an eye, they all line up, then you've made progress. Well, I'm pretty close. I mean, if you look at this chart, I'm not that far off right now. Okay,
that's great.
Yeah, and I'm officially not obese anymore. But I didn't do the medications because I was really concerned about long-term effects. They don't know the long-term effects of some of the things that are going to go on with this because it hasn't been used for this for that long. Okay, but it is a silver bullet. But if you're not doing what was explained to me, and we'll go into this in the next segment a little more, was if you're not building that muscle mass while you're doing this, you're going to have a problem down the road as a result of that. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the reasons, and so that is an issue, correct?
Sure. Well, we have so many functions that are dependent on other functions that we do, right? You can't just take a weight loss medicine but not change the way you eat.
Okay, there you have it. And when we come back to the next segment, I'm going to talk about that. What are the consequences of that? Okay, if you do the silver bullet, but you don't do the rest of it, what's going to happen? Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HIA Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HI Radio Network. If you want to find out more about us, go to the website, americashealthcareadvocate.com. All the shows are posted up there as well. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we are at 450-some thousand views on YouTube. It's growing thanks to all of you out there in the listening audience. We greatly appreciate you watching it on YouTube and listening on all the podcast channels. Again, the purpose of these shows is to educate and inform, and that's why I brought Ron Hoyler in here today. He is an RN at St. Luke's Healthcare System. By the way, if you are having an issue like this and you would like to make an appointment to see Ron or one of the specialists at the St. Luke's Healthcare System, the website, stlukeskc.org, stlukeskc.org. That's the hospital and the health system my wife and I have used for 20-some years. Great people. They do a wonderful job, and we're very fortunate to have them here as clinicians in this community. All right, you said something off here that I really liked. Make diabetes fit in your life, not live your life around diabetes. What does that mean?
Well, diabetes is a chronic disorder. It doesn't go away after a week of antibiotics or after a couple of rounds of steroids.
No, it doesn't.
And that means you're living life with it. You're married to it, so to speak, and there's no divorcing it. So you have to learn how you're going to still be able to live your life and be happy. And that means you have to master the diabetes. You make the diabetes fit into your life. You don't live your life around the diabetes worried about every single thing you put into your mouth, worried about any activity that you want to have. That's letting the diabetes win, and we don't have to do that anymore with the things that we know about diabetes. We've learned more in the last 25 years about diabetes than all the previous centuries combined. And with that knowledge, we're able to give you a winning strategy to help you succeed and to help you still be able to live your life and be happy.
All right, so I'll use myself as an example here. I like having a martini in the evening, and I may want to have a glass of wine, okay? And that was a regular thing for me. It's not a regular thing anymore. I had to walk away from that. So on the weekends, yep, I'll have a martini and I will have wine with dinner or one or the other, okay? But I had to walk away from that. I love desserts. I have a real sweet tooth. Candy and desserts, typically in the evening I would have maybe a piece or two of C's candy or maybe some dessert. I don't do that anymore either. And I watch the carbs, okay? It's protein, meat and cheese, vegetables that we, my wife cooks very healthy meals. And basically I made those changes. I increased my workout schedule. The way, I work out 3 times a week. I walk at least a mile and a half every day. Okay. And I added to my workout schedule, which is 3 times a week, but I added reps and more time to it to make it more difficult. And I've been able to accomplish this. I had to make some changes. The point is, it's not going to happen. You can do the Ozempic, you can do Wegovy, but when I go in and I'm checked, they're measuring muscle mass, body fat, and those are the two. Muscle mass needs to go up, body fat needs to come down, and I've been able to accomplish that. But it's a combination of things to make that happen. So talk about how people do that.
Well, for instance, when we get closer to our ideal body weight, we know that the insulin becomes more efficient, more sensitive. We know that when we have more muscle mass, we consume more of the energy, more of the fuel. We work our blood sugar down. When we have that exercise, that helps with the muscle, and it also helps get rid of the fat. So we are metabolically improving ourselves and making those hormones work more efficiently. The same with the dietary aspect of it. And I'll point something out to you from what you said earlier. When I say I want diabetes to fit in your life, not you live your life around your diabetes, I mean, I want patients to understand you do not have to be in range 100% of the time.
I'm not.
Okay? People sometimes think they are, and as far as we would like them to be in range as much of the time as possible, I want you to have that piece of birthday cake. I want you to be able to celebrate special occasions. And if your blood sugar is going to be high, that's going to be okay. We'll get it right back down. It's a long race. It's not a short run. And what we're looking at doing is good habits for the things that affect our blood sugars. And it's tough because we know there's over 42 identifiable variables that can affect your blood sugar. That's a lot to try to juggle. And so we have to have the right perspective of what a chronic illness is, and that it's okay to sometimes not always be perfect with our blood sugar.
And this is interesting because one of the things I learned by going to Heartland, okay, and they do a great job of this, was, hey, you can fall off the wagon on Friday and Saturday, but you get back on the wagon on Sunday and you go through the rest of the week. So that means on Saturday morning, I'm having a donut. I'm telling you right now, I'm having my donut. I may have two, actually, on occasion, all right? And there will be dessert on Saturday night, almost always. My wife has she makes homemade ice cream. I'll have ice cream on Saturday night. But during the week, Monday through Friday, that's not going to happen. Okay, so you have to be willing to make those changes. If that doesn't, yesterday I told him off air I went and got Five Guys. I got a double with bacon and an order of French fries. Okay, I haven't had Five Guys in probably 2 months, but I had it yesterday. Okay, so yeah. It's not like you have to do this every day, but you have to be willing to make some changes, right?
Right. But understand those changes aren't just improving your blood sugars. They're improving your life in so many different aspects. We know, for instance, that by losing some weight, we're also improving often our heart health, our cholesterol levels, so many other functions. We know that by reducing stress, we are reducing some of the hormones that cause us to have other issues, high blood pressure. The exercise helps with high blood pressure. They're all interrelated. So any effort that you make is going to be helpful. You don't have to be Superman in the gym every day. You don't have to eat the perfect food at every meal, but making positive steps is going to yield positive changes on several different health fronts. So
talk about one of the other things that that I see in the show notes before we did the show was sleep issues.
Yeah. So
talk about that. I mean, sleep apnea is an issue for me. I have a machine, okay, but I'm noticing I'm sleeping a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I believe statistically about half of people with diabetes do have sleep disorders. But sleep is significant when it comes to your blood sugar levels, because when you're sleeping, your body is actually using hormones to try to balance your blood sugar, right? Because we're not eating and we're not exercising while we're sleeping. And so the body is compensating with hormones. And if one of those hormone levels is off, the others try to compensate. This can result in blood sugar surge in the early morning hours called dawn phenomena. More importantly, we know, and I believe actually we mentioned this, or it was mentioned on a previous show of yours, sleep deprivation raises your insulin resistance. And so when we're not getting enough sleep, it raises our blood sugars. We know that to correlate that more than ever, we're looking at our phones. We're looking at TV, and the blue light disrupts our ability to get to sleep and stay asleep, which then the effect is we're not getting enough sleep. The effect of that is that we're more tired, but also our blood sugar levels go high. These things just go hand in hand and they compound each other. And so, again, any positive change we make can help us in so many other areas.
So people, they see they're faced with this and say, man, that's a hard climb. You don't have to do it all on the first day, do you, Ron?
No.
I mean, how do you right? You have to.
What's the saying about a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step?
There you go.
So any education that you can get to help you understand the strategies that today I'm willing to do, tomorrow I'm willing to do this one. All of those add up as positive influences.
So as a clinician, as somebody who this is your life, that you help people with this issue, when people come into you and they're faced with this, how do you get them started? What do you say to them to get them started?
Well, I think you have to meet them where they're at. It begins with where they are, how they feel, what their ability is, what their resources are. Each person is individual. And likewise, diabetes is individual to each person. And what I mean by that is there's not just one medication and one dose that does the trick. There's over 800 combinations of oral medications and doses.
I had no idea.
That a provider can choose from to try to address diabetes.
And that's why you take the time, and the first step in that journey of 1,000 miles is to go see a provider. You're listening to this around the country, okay? Find a healthcare system in your town, your city, and seek out their diabetes program. If you've got go talk to. That's what I did. I went in and talked to my primary care physician, Dr. Bozarth, and she said, Carrie, you're going to keep fighting this until you get some help. And I didn't know how to do this. I tried all this stuff on my own. It didn't work. That's why I went to Heartland, and out of Heartland came a program, and now where I'm at, I'm in a much better place. If you want help here in Kansas City, StLukesKC.org. StLukesKC.org is the website. Go up on the website. You can access their diabetes program and make an appointment to go see one of their clinicians and get on the road to recovery. Change your life for the better. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting on the HIA Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA. Here on the HIA Radio Network, you can find out more about us by going to the website americashealthcareadvocate.com. All right, so in studio with me, Ron Hoyler. He is an RN at St. Luke's Healthcare System. The topic today is diabetes, what to do about it if you're pre-diabetic, what to do about it if you are diabetic, if you're type 2 diabetic, and how you can overcome that chronic condition and disease if you take the first steps to do so and get on some type of regimen to change your life. So here's a part that I find fascinating. There's a big emphasis on this country and the constant increase in the cost of health care, specifically health insurance. And what most people do is they look at the health insurance companies and they say they're the problem. Well, maybe they're some of the problem, but they're certainly not all of the problem. And I'm going to give you an example. $413 billion is what we are spending on diabetes in this country. $413 billion. That's what happens from those people that get amputations, those people who have vision issues, those people who have a whole host of things that are outcroppings of this particular disease. So that's why, we're doing this today, is to talk about that. So if you're an employer out there, there are programs available, and let's talk about that.
Sure.
The insurance, you said, pays for it. Medicare pays for it. Talk about it, Ron.
Yeah, they are recognizing more and more that preventative medicine, education, can prevent, right? It can stop some of these issues from happening before they even begin, or it can lessen the burden that they create. I've told you this before, and the information I have was that 1/3 of the entire Medicare budget is allotted towards the complications of diabetes. 33% of the Medicare budget for complications from diabetes. Why are we waiting until there's a problem when we can work on it on the front end and prevent some of the millions, if not billions of dollars that we have to spend?
And so here's some if you're an employer out there listening to this, you've got a health care plan for your employees. You want to do something that's going to help? Put out a memo. Get on. Have a meeting for people that have somebody come in and talk to them from St. Luke's or from wherever. Okay, about what this means to have type 2 diabetics. Excess costs associated with medications constitute 44% of the direct medical burden. Hello, that's your health insurance budget. That's a premium that goes up every year. 2020, a total of 7.86 million hospital discharges were reported with diabetes and any listed diagnosis among U.S. adults aged 18 or older. Here's another one. In 2020, 16.8 million emergency room visits were reported with diabetes listed as a diagnosis among adults. 267,000 hypoglycemic crisis and 202,000 from hypoglycemia. Talk about hypoglycemia, what that is, how that works.
It's scary. It's the medical term for low blood sugar. And, much like if your car were low on gas and would begin to sputter, it's not gonna get you where you need to go. When your body's blood sugar levels get low, you are not able to get the appropriate amount of fuel to your brain to think straight. Your muscles aren't going to work the way you want them to. It's a dangerous situation to be in. It's a scary situation to be in.
And that's brought on by diabetes?
Well, what happens? Insulin is a hormone that it works to lower the blood sugar levels. And as I mentioned earlier, you have counter-regulatory hormones that actually try to raise it up and balance it out. And that can be directly impacted by medications that you're taking, by the amount of activity that you're doing, by the type of food you ate or didn't eat. So many variables. And it's a balancing act, right? And sometimes that tips to the low side. And that can cause a situation that can be dangerous, it can be embarrassing, and it can be deadly. So you're
yo-yoing back and forth is what you're basically saying here. Okay.
It's certainly something that can happen. Variability.
Right. That's interesting. You know, and the thing about this is interesting to me from the healthcare side and from the health insurance side. These dollars are dollars that don't have to be spent, people. These are dollars that can go back in to improving employee benefits, doing lots of other things if there's a program in place. So how big a role does education play in this? I mean, this is what you're doing at St. Luke's,
right?
Which is extremely important. Mm-hmm. How big a role does educating people and getting them to recognize the problem so they'll do something about fixing the problem?
Yeah, well, it's a big part of the equation because this is not, as I said earlier, just a condition that you get a prescription for. This is a condition you live with, and the actions and decisions that you make directly affect it. And so what you're choosing to do, if you're choosing to supersize, what you're choosing to eat, how much, if you're choosing to do any activity or exercise, how much, how little, if you are going to your doctor or not going to your doctor, all of these play a part in the equation that's going to make it a little bit easier for you to manage diabetes or maybe have devastating effects from not taking care of it.
And if you've got a family member that's dealing with this, how important it is to get that family member in front of a clinician like yourself to understand before it causes a crisis in the family. That's your mom, that's your dad. Maybe you're a caregiver for your grandmother or your mother. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the complications are devastating from diabetes. You're talking that it's the most common cause of end-stage renal failure. That means dialysis 3-4 times a week for several hours. That's not how you want to live your life. These are the kind of things.
There is no life when you're doing that.
Well, that's what we want to try to avoid, and we can by becoming educated on not just the diabetes, but when you're getting the diabetes education, our dietitians are talking to you about the diets and food labels and understanding the amount of sodium that's coming in and other issues that just make for a healthier lifestyle.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the things I learned at Heartland, because I do meet with a dietitian, I read the labels on everything I buy in the store now. If it's got corn syrup sweetener or artificial sweetener, the level of sugar, like I like yogurt. I eat yogurt. I eat sugar-free yogurt now. I found it's not bad. It's actually pretty good. I've kind of gotten used to it. But I never paid attention to that stuff before. It's back to education.
Well, and even if you do try to pay attention, it's tricky. Those labels will talk about this is really good for fiber. What they don't tell you is that it's also full of sugar and sodium.
Have to read what the ingredients are. And I've learned to do that. That's all part of this process. That's why I wanted to do this today. Thank you for coming in here and doing this. We'll do some more of these. But again, this is, I'm talking about my personal journey here because I think it's important. I'm 75 years old. I've got 6 grandchildren. Okay. I want to be around a while. Okay. And I knew if I didn't do something about this, that it was going to get significantly worse and I was going to have bigger problems. So I did. And I'm telling you, you can do the same thing. You remember what Ron said, you don't have to go 1,000-mile journey and start out at 100 miles a day. You do the first mile. You take one step. You get in front of somebody. If you've got a family member with this issue, urge them, get them to listen to the show. Go up on the YouTube channel. It'll make a difference. Thank you for doing this. And now I leave you with this thought from Dr. Martin Luther King. Americans must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we will surely perish together as fools. I think we're living in those times right now. You might want to take that to heart. Thank you for listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HI Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. Goodbye, America.